Good evening, everyone. I'm Meredith Walters from Brooklyn Public Library, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm delighted that we are launching what is a three-part series in association with the Public Theater. It's called Public Shakespeare Presents. And after tonight's fantastic event, we'll come together again on December 3rd and then on December 17th. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I would like to introduce you to Michael Sexton of the Public Theater. He's the director of the Public Shakespeare Initiative.
Thank you, Meredith. Good evening and welcome everyone. I'm Michael Sexton. I'm the director of the Public Shakespeare Initiative at the Public Theater, and it gives me great joy to be with you tonight. And we're so pleased to be collaborating with the Brooklyn Public Library and BPL Presents. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Jakob Orsos and the whole team at BPL Presents. Before proceeding, I want to acknowledge the first inhabitants and caretakers of the land where the Public Theater and Brooklyn Public Library's many branches stand, the land of present-day New York City, the land of the Lenape and Canarsie people. We would want to acknowledge their painful history of forced removal, and we honor their ancestors and pay our respects to their continued and emerging presence here. It's a strange and powerful moment. Strange, it feels like I'm talking to everybody from the heart of a moment of change. It's certainly a moment unlike any I've lived through, stressful and uncertain, but it's full of promise too. For us at the Public Theater, it's been a time of reflection and of self-examination, a chance to look back, reflect on where we've been, and pause before we move forward. By taking an honest, questioning look at the legacy of the Public Theater, our relationship to the city and the communities we serve, and Shakespeare's role in all of it, we think that truths can be exposed, differences of experience and understanding can be shared, and a more meaningful, collaborative, and anti-racist future can be forged. Tonight's conversation is part of that effort. Tonight, we'll be taking a look at Aaron the Moor, a character from Titus Andronicus, one of Shakespeare's earliest and strangest plays. By far, it is his goriest. It's a revenge tragedy featuring mutilation, rape, beheadings, and more. It also features some of Shakespeare's most elusive and dazzling poetry, and one of his most arresting and disturbing figures, Aaron the Moor. I directed a production of the play in 2011 at the Public Theater, and we're blessed to have with us Ron Cephas Jones, who played Aaron in that production, and William Jackson Harper, who played Demetrius, one of the two wicked sons of Tamara, Queen of the Goths. During the conversation, I'll be keeping an eye on the live chat on YouTube, as well as the Q&A button here on the Zoom call. So I invite you all to add your thoughts and questions for the panel throughout the conversation. In about 50 or 60 minutes, we'll be looking to engage those questions and thoughts more deeply. This video will live on the Public Theater's YouTube channel, and I believe BPL's YouTube channel as well. And you should subscribe to both of them right away if you haven't already. There's a huge amount of great stuff on both sites. So and also if you want to recommend it to someone else after this, please spread the word. As Meredith said, next month we'll be continuing the series. BPL and the Public Theater will be holding 2 more events like this one. Conversations with a collection of artists, scholars, and thinkers, digging deep, challenging assumptions, and reading great poetry. And not simply learning about Shakespeare's work, but learning what engaging with Shakespeare's language, ideas, and characters can teach us about ourselves and our worlds. On December 3rd, we'll be sitting down, virtually, of course, with the great author and literary critic, Stephen Greenblatt, the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and author, Jill Lepore, and the great playwright and actor, Issa Davis, in an evening called What is the City But the People? Shakespeare, Art, and Citizenship. On December 17th, Cornell University professor of comparative literature, Philip Lawrence, will be, and the great actor, Raul Esparza, will be talking about and reading from the work of the great Spanish playwright, Lope de Vega, his fascinating play, Punishment Without Revenge, and Shakespeare's Hamlet. We'll hear passages from both plays in their original languages. I now want to introduce you to tonight's panelists and readers, Ayanna Thompson, Ron Cephas Jones, and William Jackson Harper. Ron Cephas Jones has been seen on Broadway in Of Mice and Men and the MFer with a Hat. At the Public Theater, he's been in Everybody's Ruby, Titus Andronicus, and played the title role in Richard III. Many off-Broadway productions, including a series of indelible performances in the plays of Stephen Adly Guirgis, including Between Riverside and Crazy, Our Lady of 121st Street, and of course, the unforgettable Jesus Hopped the A-Train. He may be known to many of you as the character William Hill on TV's This Is Us, for which he's won 2 Emmy Awards. William Jackson Harper has appeared on Broadway in All the Way, at the Public Theater in Titus Andronicus and the Total Bent, and off-Broadway in productions of Ruined, Placebo, After the Blast, and Queens Boulevard. You may know him as Chidi on NBC's The Good Place. Ayanna Thompson is a good old friend of us at the Public Theater and is an important part of our moment of reflection and our efforts to become a better place. She's an invaluable thinker and writer, and she's the Regents Professor of English at Arizona State University and the director of the Arizona Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies. She's the author of the forthcoming Blackface, as well as Teaching Shakespeare with Purpose, Passing Strange, Shakespeare, Race, and Contemporary America, and Performing Race and Torture on the Early Modern Stage. She's the editor of the Cambridge Companion to Shakespeare and Race and Colorblind Shakespeare. She's currently collaborating with Curtis Perry on the Arden 4 edition of Titus Andronicus. Thanks again for coming, and we'll see you later in the Q&A portion of the event. Enjoy. Ayana, take it away.
Thanks to Meredith Walters and everyone at the Brooklyn Public Library, and Michael Sexton and everyone at the Public Theater. It's an honor to be here. When I was in university over 30 years ago, the answer to the question, did the concept of race exist in Shakespeare's lifetime, was an emphatic no. Explicitly, I was told that Moor did not mean Black, African, and most especially did not mean sub-Saharan African. My Shakespeare professor said that I was being anachronistic when I attempted to link Shakespeare's inclusion of Moors like Aaron, Othello, and the Prince of Morocco with the burgeoning transatlantic slave trade of the 17th century. He said to look at race in early modern texts was to misapply modern concepts to them. If you ask today in the 2020s if the concept of race existed for Shakespeare and his contemporaries, the answer is an emphatic yes. Yes, the concept of race existed. Yes, racialized epistemologies existed and were employed and deployed. And yes, Shakespeare himself engaged in both the symbolic and materialistic elements that comprise race making. Yes, Shakespeare and race were coeval. They grew up as contemporaries. So what's changed from 1990, the year I started university, to today? The history has not changed, although some new archival materials have been unearthed by scholars like Imtiaz Habib. But the ways that scholars are trained to search the archives, read the texts, and analyze their significances has. While the critics writing in the 1980s and 1990s were trained primarily as new critics, post-structuralists, Marxists, feminists, and new historicists, the scholars working and writing today have benefited from the growth, birth, and influence of African American studies, critical race theory, post-colonial studies, queer theory, and most recently, critical white studies. My work was informed by a deep dive into both African American studies and post-colonial studies when I was in college. Thus, by the time I took the required Shakespeare course in my final year at university, I had an analytical toolkit that was completely different, foreign, and unfamiliar to my well-esteemed professor. I saw race and race making. He saw anachronisms. And this was most especially pronounced by our disagreements over Titus Andronicus. One of the major changes in perspectives from the 1990s to today is an understanding that the world in which Shakespeare was living, observing, and creating was an imperial one in which European countries like England were not only exploring parts of the world that were new to them, but also creating exploitative systems that work to diversify and bolster their economies at the expenses of other. Around Shakespeare's lifetime, the European world experienced increased and sustained encounters with an expanding world, including the arrival of the first large group of Africans to Portugal in 1444, the first voyage to the Americas by Christopher Columbus in 1492, and the first influx of Africans into England in 1554. At this exact moment, England's first freestanding commercial secular theaters were being built in London. And on those stages, the globe and its people were being constructed, embodied, and enacted. One scholar tabulates between 1579 and 1642, there were at least 50 plays with racialized figures. And another scholar counts at least 70 productions with Black characters. It's important to realize that the early modern theater was not only reflecting back English ideas about race, but also that these plays were creating new concepts, new stereotypes, and new visions for race. On the early modern stage, race making is partially constructed rhetorically through, for example, rhetorical patterns, rhetorical errors, figures of speech, metaphors, colloquialisms, and/or idioms, and partially constructed materially through, for example, costumes, racial prosthetics, wigs, mustaches, physical gestures, vocal timbre, and/or accent. In this way, early modern English theater in general, and Shakespeare's plays in particular, provide a treasure trove of evidence of the ways race was being constructed in the period, not in a single, stable, and consistent way, but rather in multiple, erratic, and at times contradictory ways. Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus from 1594 was his first tragedy and his first foray into the revenge tragedy tradition. He would return to this genre most famously in Hamlet, but the desire for revenge sits at the heart of several of Shakespeare's plays. Titus Andronicus tells the tale of the decline of the late Roman Empire. And again, it's important to remember that England was thinking about its own empire and imperial endeavors when Shakespeare penned this work. Returning home from his martial defeat of the Goths, Titus Andronicus, a Roman hero, finds his empire in a state of upheaval. With the death of Caesar, Titus must help to select a new emperor. In a strange turn of events, Saturninus, the new Roman emperor, takes Tamara, the queen of the Goths, as his bride and frees all the Gothic slaves, including Aaron the Moor, whom Titus has just brought back. Tamara, however, only accepts Saturninus's proposal in order to exact revenge on Titus for sacrificing one of her sons. She reveals her revenge plot to her lover, Aaron the Moor, and her two sons, Chiron and Demetrius, who dutifully begin the cycle of revenge by raping and mutilating Titus's only daughter, Lavinia. After cutting off his own hand in an attempt to placate the new emperor, Titus finally discovers who actually mutilated Lavinia, and he too plans revenge. In the midst of this chaos, Tamara gives birth to Aaron's baby, but asks that he kill it in order to save her position as empress. Aaron refuses and protects the baby's life throughout the events of the play. In a final horrific scene, Titus kills Chiron and Demetrius, grinds their bones, cooks them into pies, and serves the pies to their mother, Tamara. He then kills Lavinia, Tamara, and is killed himself. In the end, Titus's son Lucius returns to Rome with a Gothic army. Lucius captures Aaron, but he can only get Aaron to confess all his crimes by promising to protect the baby's life. Lucius buries Aaron up to his neck and forbids anyone to help him, and then Lucius becomes emperor himself. The violence of Shakespeare's play was typical for Elizabethan revenge tragedies. Kidd's Spanish Tragedy in 1587 and Marston's Antonio's Revenge of 1600 are the closest revenge tragedy contemporaries to Titus Andronicus, and they are no less violent, sanguinary, or disgusting. What makes Shakespeare's play unique within the genre is his interweaving of a revenge plot with racial politics. Revenge tragedies rarely contain racialized characters, even though the genre thrived in a period when such depictions were popular. In a genre that is obsessed with bodies, corpses, and body parts, it's amazing how uninterested revenge tragedies were in race. Shakespeare is one of the few revenge tragedians to capitalize on the potential connections between the genre's interest in the corporal and the early modern fascination with the racialized body. And that's why this play has become important for many scholars working on pre-modern race studies. In Aaron the Moor, we get a character who is not only aware of the racial politics of the ancient Roman society he inhabits, but also a character who demonstrates his awareness that racial politics rest on stereotypes. He knows that he is seen as the black dog who is senselessly vicious, unloving, and unrepentant, and he plays to that stereotype. As a play, Titus Andronicus is prescient in the way that it depicts the white fear and white pathologizing of Black anger and Black vengeance. While Aaron does not speak until the second act of the play, he is on stage for most of the first act, observing the machinations of the Roman Empire. His first speech, which Ron Cephas Jones will read momentarily, would have been a shock to the early modern audience because this Black man displays a linguistic dexterity and a clear aspirational plan to destroy the unjust Roman Empire. All right, Ron, take it away.
Now climbeth Tamara Olympus' top, safe out of fortune's shot, and sits aloft, secure of thunder's crack and lightning's flash, advanced above pale envy's threatening reach, as when the golden sun salutes the morn, and having gilt the ocean with his beams, gallops the zodiac in his glistering coach and overlooks the highest peering hills. So Tamara, upon her wit doth earthly honor wait, and virtue stoops and trembles at her frown. Then Aaron, arm thy heart and fit thy thoughts to mount aloft this imperial mistress, and mount her pitch, whom thou in triumph long hast prisoner held, fettered in amorous chains, and faster bound to Aaron's charming eyes than Prometheus tied to Caucasus. Away with slavish weeds and servile thoughts, I will be bright and shine in pearl and gold to wait upon this new-made empress. To wait, said I, to wanton with this queen, this goddess, this Semiramis, this nymph, this siren that will charm Rome Saturnine and see his shipwreck and his commonweals.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to bring both Will and Ron into the conversation now. While Aaron's the only Black character in Shakespeare's play, Michael Sexton's brilliant 2011 production had a multiracial cast, including Will Harper as Demetrius, Tamara's son. I wonder if you could talk about the rehearsal room conversations that you had around this kind of racial casting.
Will, should I go first?
Yeah, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, great. I think that was the first thing that I engaged Michael with, is to first identify how we were going to bring the Afrocentric thought into it. Of course, I immediately, as an African-American actor, a Black actor, and also very Afrocentric, and I wanted to make sure that that lens was secured. And immediately, Michael had the same idea. Actually, it was his first thought as well. So we explored that a lot during the course of this, based on my experience, my feelings about, especially the rageful part, the interracial part of this, how that also fit in, and the use of that, and the use of the rest of the members of the royal family, and how he fit in as well. Did he start out as a servant? Did he woo the queen? How did he get that close to the queen to woo her, to begin to bed her, and have the machinations of her falling in love with him with a hidden agenda? So we talked about all of that, but the racial part was clear right from the bat, and we were going to continue to, and that's what I loved about Michael, and how he was willing to be open to hear my feelings and thoughts about how I felt about being Aaron, and my experiences with racism and the things that I would feel and the rage that I would feel as well when we get to the second part of it. But it was clear that we were going to move through this character through an Afrocentric lens. I mean, all the way to the point where we got past it.
Yeah.
And then we were in the part of what is pure evil from all aspects of the human. So we started to also talk about the fact that race really doesn't exist. It was established that we understood that it was a mechanism that was created. So if you go all the way back to the scientific part of it, then we're looking at man's ability to destroy man. So you can go all the way back to when Cain slew Abel. The ability of a human to kill and take the life of another human goes back to the first existence of man. So
Yeah.
it becomes a story about good versus evil. We could bring the socio-political part into it of race, but the purity of Aaron in this context can be, he's an evil, he represents the evil in man and the revenge in man, justifiably through whatever feelings and context that you could take. So we explored all of that from Aaron's point of view.
And Will, what were your conversations like about you being Demetrius, Tamara's son, who is put into the kind of plot to destroy your brother, the baby?
Yeah, it's you know, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, it's like, obviously when we even started talking about doing this, I was like, yeah, cool. I mean, like, cool. I'm totally down to do this. Does this work? You know? And so like, it's because it's, for me, the racial stuff in this play is it's really visceral. So to just ignore it doesn't quite work. Right. You know, but it's like, I think the thing is for me, and something that I think that, you know, Michael and I, as well as Patrick, who played Chiron, we, you know, I think we sort of landed in this place of, you know, there's no sort of like taking in the self-hatred of the current time a little bit that some of my brothers and sisters might be dealing with at times.
Yes.
And sort of just, and like, and just playing with it a little bit more. And
so you played Demetrius as a Black man then?
Yeah. I mean, it's here. It's me, you know?
Hey, I am totally there with you that I don't believe there are colorblind productions, but
yeah. So and so I was like, you know, there is something there that maybe in some of the scenes will sort of reveal itself.
Yeah.
But we didn't go through the motions of like trying to like make sure it's all justified. Because I think that's something that is really interesting, especially in race as we deal with it now, is there's a lot of inconsistencies with how people treat each other or treat a group of people. You know, they'll treat one person from this specific group one way and then another person a different way, and then treat the group very differently from the way they'll treat an individual, and have all sorts of justifications that they'll have in their head for why they do what they do. And it's beyond me, and it'll be beyond the person that's probably having the discussion. And so I think that, you know, one of the things that we landed on was just kind of letting the play exist in that messiness and in that contradiction.
That is race. That is the heart of race, right? That it is always messy and incoherent and opportunistic. And so I'm going to lead us into the next reading, because this is the scene where we'll get to see Aaron and Demetrius argue about what should happen to the baby. So this is Act 4, Scene 2, and the biracial baby is delivered by Tamara to Aaron for him to kill. Tamara's sons, including Demetrius, encourage this infanticide, but Aaron resists and delivers what is thought to be the first Black Power speech in English. Ron will continue to perform as Aaron, and Will read Demetrius. And then we'll come back and have lots more conversation after this. So, okay, Act 4, Scene 2.
Villain, what hast thou done?
That which thou canst undo.
Thou hast undone our mother.
Villain, I have done thy mother.
And therein, hellish dog, thou hast undone her. Woe to her chance. and damned her loathed choice. Accurse the offspring of so foul a fiend, it shall not live.
It shall not die.
I'll broach the tadpole upon my rapier's point. Nurse, give it to me. My sword shall soon dispatch it.
Sooner this sword shall plow thy bowels up. Stay, murderous villains. Will you kill your brother? Now by the burning tapers of the sky that shone so brightly when this boy was got, he dies upon my scimitar's sharp point that touches this my firstborn son and heir. I tell you, younglings, not Enceladus, with all his threatening band of Typhon's brood, nor great Aceldes, nor the god of war shall seize this prey out of his father's hands. What? What? You sanguine, shallow-hearted boys, you white-limed walls, you alehouse painted signs. Coal black is better than another you in that it scorns to bear another you. All the water in the ocean can never turn the swan's black legs to white, although she laid them hourly in the flood. Tell the empress, from me, I am of age to keep mine own, excuse it how she can.
Wilt thou betray thy noble mistress thus?
My mistress is my mistress. This is myself. The vigor in the picture of my youth, this before all the world do I prefer. This maugre all the world will I keep safe, or some of you shall smoke for it in Rome.
Amazing. So I think for many of us who work on pre-modern race studies and on Shakespearean race, this is where it is. This is the moment where we're like, whoa, something's happening here that our professors didn't teach us. And it's what you sanguine, shallow-hearted boys, you white-limed walls, you alehouse painted signs. He's denigrating whiteness and then saying that blackness is the best race that you could be. This is like the earliest, kind of pro-black speech in English, I think. So what was it like to deliver these lines for both of you?
Man, it was like, you redneck, in modern day, you know what I mean? Whatever the modern use is, just getting those words in your mouth and really realizing what he's saying. Like once you're black, you're black. You can sit in the shade, you can't get light. You're black in the sun, you're black in the shade. Whiteness changes. It's forked tongue. You change. You're not the same all the time. And therein lies the naturalness and the beauty and the truth of our color. We are who we are. But sometimes we don't know what you are. Sometimes you're white, sometimes you're pale, sometimes you're a shade. You get under the sun, you're a little bit. So he's
might be orange.
Right. Right. But he's making this distinction, the goodness of it, the purity and goodness of it. And he's reveling in that as well. So it's also the moment that's not written where you see this tenderness,
yes, and
this caring, and even in himself, he's finding something in himself. And so I remember in the production, Michael and I spent time on that moment. Like, let's tell that story. The words are not there, but it's there. And you see the moment where he's reflective, and all of a sudden you feel a softness for him that you haven't felt before. It's like, oh, this man has the ability to love.
Yeah, and I wonder if you could put that in dialogue with what you were just saying a few minutes ago about him embodying kind of evil, because I guess I've never thought of Aaron as evil because of the immense love that he has for his baby. And he's the only parent in the play that protects his child.
Protects his child at all costs. He's ready. He gives his life.
Yes.
In the end, he gives his life, and he has protect my son. It was such a beautiful moment in understanding the tenderness and the love that surfaces somewhere in all that stuff that he's doing all along, this plotting, this planning, and then all of a sudden he sees this baby And it's in that moment that the transformation happens to where you realize there's something else deeper also in him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this all of it is human.
Yes.
It's this human thing: revenge, evil, anger, rage, and then love, an
Yeah.
immense tenderness, a love that you are willing to sacrifice your life in that moment after purging and plotting, and then his life changes forever.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
child.
Will, do you want to hop in as well?
Yeah, it's like it's a weird thing to be on stage in that moment and be like, "Yeah, man, tell him." Oh, wait, no, you're telling me. And so it's always like a little bit of like a dual consciousness. But I think the thing that is that for being a black man playing Demetrius in that moment, it's like mom cannot be having babies by other people, bro. That's all there is to it. Like there cannot be like these other kids like showing up being like, "Oh, also, I know we've been together a minute, but like we can't have that." And so it's like, so for me it was more of like this can't happen. It's like I see where you're coming from, bro, but this cannot happen.
So
You
for
know?
your Demetrius, you took race out of the picture, and it was more about like, you're about to mess up our whole game.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
you're about to mess up the whole game right now. And so it's like because otherwise for me, I mean, like if it was like, in this production, Aaron and Demetrius against everybody else, you'd have to do some gymnastics and some rewriting to make it all fit. But I think that it's like if there is something of, especially with the two brothers are very much self-serving, very much just sort of uh very no impulse control, impulsive, that's the word I was looking for. So like these are not good dudes, as it stands. And so anything that leans into serving themselves feels like it's very much on track for who these characters are regardless. And I think that race, while being a part of our rendering in this world, it's if that's got to go by the wayside, any sort of solidarity has to go by the wayside to make sure that our thing is not messed up, then so be it.
Yeah.
And so it's which also that could say something. Someone could divine something from that. So it's, I don't know. I mean, but it was in that moment, it was just much easier to hew very closely to the circumstances of the scene.
I appreciate your willingness to talk about the mental gymnastics that actors of color have to go through when they're in classical productions, because it does seem that actors of color are doing a whole other layer of work that our white counterparts are not doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's like when you're like, I did this production of Midsummer some years ago, and I remember I was playing Lysander, and I remember like at one point Demetrius says to somebody like, "Away, you Ethiop," and I was just sort of like, all right, like that's an insult to me, but I'm supposed to just like let that slide as as like it's just an insult that they use in the time. But it's like when you have these this multiracial cast up here doing this thing, it's like, it's, as a person of color, you're not going to just chuck that away. You're going to kind of be like, oh, right, they used to say shit like this all the time. And and you just have to figure out where you're going to swallow it, where you're going to, dive in, because, things are going to stop making sense. It's always a little bit of like a thing where you're just like, it's like, it's all hurled towards us, and that's what makes it tough to just, I don't know, to just enjoy it and just get lost in it. You're always kind of like waiting, you're always kind of like, it's like you're walking down a sidewalk in the pitch black and somebody just walked all the dogs and you just know you're going to step in some doo-doo at some point.
Yeah.
Like that's what it feels like doing these texts for me often.
Wow. Ron, you are nodding your head.
It happens also in, like, say, for instance, I did a production of The Tempest, and when you have a person of color do Caliban, and then it brings up these issues of colonization and how these men from Italy come to this island and they find this creature. And depending on how it's directed, the creature could be human, the creature could be inhuman. He's an animal, he's not an animal. And I did a production of it with Sam Mendes with the Bridge Project, and we did it around different parts of the world. And it was interesting how in different parts of the world, many of the cultures see Caliban as the lead in the play. And they immediately identify Caliban as being colonized. And when you start to have that conversation, depending on who's directing it, they tend to make Caliban more animalistic, and that the island is not really being colonized, and that they don't acknowledge that it's more mystical and magical, and Prospero has all this magical power, you know, when in fact you could look at it the other way and say basically he's a man who's like losing his mind because he's on an island. And so I did another production of it playing Prospero with the Classical Theater of Harlem, and Ty Jones and Carl Caulfield put together the production totally through an Afrocentric lens with Caribbean rhythms and Caribbean feel, and it had a whole different interpretation. And then Caliban becomes, in the end, conqueror of his own island.
Yeah.
And you see his image at the end of the play when everyone else leaves the island, you realize, is Caliban's. And he spends most of the journey in that play trying to kill Prospero. His mission is to kill him because he has enslaved Caliban. Because Caliban starts to be attracted to his daughter to procreate his island. But sometimes that gets looked over, you know, and so it depends on the lens that you decide to put that production into place, and whether or not you want to accept that in some elements, Othello, Caliban, Aaron, there are Afrocentric images that are undeniable. Now you could ignore them, but if you sit in the audience and you're Afrocentric and you woke, you're going to be like, what was that about? You know what I mean? You know, there are reasons and deeper reasons why Othello kills Desdemona. There are deep, deep reasons why Aaron says that last speech about his son and the things that he does.
Well, let's get to that last speech. And then I want us, and then we will talk about Black Rage and Black Vengeance, okay? So, but at the end of the play, Lucius returns to Rome with a Gothic army ready to defeat Saturninus and Tamara. He captures Aaron in a cave where Aaron has been caring for his baby. This scene is the moment when Aaron reveals all the crimes that he has helped to orchestrate against the Andronicus family. Ron will continue as Aaron, and this time Will be Lucius. This is Act 5, Scene 1.
First know thou, I begot him on the Empress.
Oh, most insatiate and luxurious woman.
Tut, Lucius, this was but a deed of charity to which thou shalt hear me anon. 'Twas her 2 sons that murdered Basinius. They cut thy sister's tongue and ravished her, and cut her hands, and trimmed her, as thou sawest.
Oh, detestable villain, cost thou that trimming?
Why, she was washed, and cut, and trimmed, and 'twas trim sport for them which had the doing of it.
Oh, barbarous, beastly villains, like thyself.
Indeed, I was their tutor to instruct them. That codding spirit they had from their mother, as sure a card as ever won a set. That bloody mind, I think, they learned of me. A true as a dog as ever fought at head. But let me, my deeds, be witness of my worth. I trained thy brother into that guileful hole where the dead corpse of Basinius lay. I wrote the letter that thy father found and hid the gold within that letter mentioned, confederate with the queen and her 2 sons. And what not done that thou hast not cause to rue, wherein I had no stroke of mischief in it? I played the cheater for thy father's hand, and when I had it, drew myself apart and almost broke my heart with extreme laughter. I pried me through the crevice of the wall, when for his hand he had his two sons' heads, beheld his tears, and laughed so heartily that both mine eyes were rainy like to his. And, and when I told the Empress of this sport, she sounded almost at my pleasing tale, and for my tidings gave me 20 kisses.
What canst thou say all this? Never blush.
I, like a black dog, as the saying is.
Art thou not sorry for these heinous deeds?
I, that I had not done 1,000 more. Even now I curse the day, and yet I think few come within the compass of my curse, wherein I did not some notorious ill, as kill a man, or else devise his death, ravish a maid, or plot the way to do it, accuse some innocent, and forswore myself, set deadly enmity between two friends, make poor men's cattle break their necks, set fire on barns and haystacks in the heat of night, and bid the owners quench them with their tears. Oft have I dug up grave men, dead men from their graves, and set them upright at their dear friend's door, even when their sorrows almost was forgot. And on their skins, as on the bark of trees, have with my knife carved in Roman letters, "Let not your sorrows die, though I am dead." But I have done 1,000 dreadful things as willingly as one would kill a fly. And nothing grieves me more heartily indeed that I cannot do 1,000 more.
Wow. So there is a stereotype of the irrationally angry Black man and Black woman. But Shakespeare's Aaron is so much more nuanced. This is not a space of irrationality. So I wonder, Ron, if you could talk to us about what it's like to perform this Black Rage.
This is a very difficult monologue. I only could do as much justice as I could in the context of where I'm reading it, because so much stuff comes up, and it needs to be tempered. There are moments that need to be tempered, slowed down, sped up, and unfortunately, I didn't have the time to capture it quite like I would have. Anyway, I don't have to do that, but it goes back to our original conversation of what comes up. And if you think about everything from the beginning of time, everything that we learn about the history of chattel slavery, about how manhood has been taken away and continues to be taken away from us. If you think about photographs of Black men being hung with fires under them and people gathering around to watch, if you think about the picture and the image of Emmett Till when it first appeared in the newspapers, and you wonder, how can somebody commit such atrocity to such a young child? If you think about all the Black women, mothers and daughters that have been raped and ravished, and you think about this girl and what has been done to this girl, and you think what been done to this girl has actually been done to many of our Black women in the history. If you think about King Leopold, and when the diamond workers and the mine workers would stick a little piece of diamond in their pocket, he would chop their hands off. And so all these African people and young boys and girls grew up with no hands, because the king decided they stole a piece of their own jewel that grew out of their own earth, and he would chop their hands off. And then you see how these boys mutilated this girl, and you think horribly, or you think justifiably, well, if you have done all this to us, do you actually think that we would want not to do this back to you in revenge? Is that not justifiable? I think the things that he is saying here is indicative of things that I don't want to say that I'm willing to do, but may have felt that, even down to the point where if someone were to harm my daughter or put their hands on my daughter in a way that I would instinctively want to kill them. It's a natural instinct to protect my child. An eagle protects the baby bird, a baby whale, any animal in the kingdom of the animal kingdom, when threatened in this way, will react in a way that will try to eliminate that threat at all costs to protect. And so these are the things that he's saying. Like, if I could dig up these dead bodies and put them on your porch just to get the pleasure of watch you cry again from what you have done to me, if I could plot a way to kill a man, I would kill him. If I could find the officer that had his knee on my brother's neck for 8 minutes, if I could just have a moment in a room with him. How many Black men have said that if I could just get this man in a room, I can't even begin to tell you what I would do to him. If I could find this man who shot Breonna Taylor, if I could have a moment with him, and me and my brothers could gather around and I could call all my friends over, what we would do to him. And am I justified to do that? Am I justified to feel that way? Am I justified to even feel that way, let alone not do it? But am I justified to express this? This monologue gives me license to do that. It gives me license to be that man. And that's what I marveled about this monologue. When I first read it, I couldn't believe it. I was like, Shakespeare wrote this? And I'm like, well, did he? Was he trying? I mean, no, he couldn't have. But then that was the question.
Yeah.
Was he cognizant of this when he wrote it?
That's right. I mean, 1594.
The ability to say, here you go, Ron. Here you go. You can purge, all the years of vomiting and holding it in and swallowing. It's like, you're able to vomit, but you can't open your mouth, and you have to take that vomit and swallow it. And you figure you do that for like 200 years. Every time you see an atrocity, like and now with video cameras, we see these acts and we sit at home and we just have to purge that rage. What do we do with that rage? Tears start coming down. We have nowhere to go. We have no therapy. We have no counselors. We need someone to sit down and talk about this so we can stop forming gangs and killing each other, so we can stop going to the alcohol, so we can stop abusing our women and abusing our children, so that we can be loyal to our wives and support our children, because we have no way to purge. We have no way to therapeutically figure out what this rage is. We're stuck between Martin Luther King and Malcolm. And when you're a young boy, you see these things where dogs are sicked on, and they say march peacefully. And then you see another man held up in an apartment building with a shootout with the police, and you're a young man, maybe 11 or 12, and you're stuck in the middle and you're confused.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do. You can say, well, turn the other cheek, and then you can say an eye for an eye. So when you're young, and you don't have someone to help guide you through that transition, because all those men that are guiding you are either in jail or dead, and your mothers and grandmothers are protecting you from all this. They want to keep you safe, regardless of whether it's this or that. Their objective is to keep you alive.
Yeah.
And
So you couldn't have known this, but I was just, my segue to the next bit was a reference to Malcolm X, because in an Oxford debate that he had in 1964, he quoted Hamlet's "to be or not to be" speech, soliloquy, arguing that white moderates were urging Blacks to lose the name of action. So Will, we're going to have you do this, most famous soliloquy in a second. But I'd want us, when you come back afterwards, I'd love to hear your reflections on the "To Be Black" video that was released this summer, and the way that Hamlet's soliloquy was used in that moment. So this is, of course, the famous soliloquy from Hamlet from Act 3, Scene 1, and will be our Hamlet.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing in them to die, to sleep. No more. And by a sleep, to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation, devoutly to be wished to die, to sleep. To sleep, perchance to dream, my, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death? The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus, conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. And enterprises of great pitch and moment, with this regard, their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action.
Thank you. So, Will, I wonder if you could reflect back on what Ron was just saying about, kind of all the vomit that he was able to release performing Aaron, and put that either in contrast or in comparison with Hamlet, and also the role that this soliloquy played in the hashtag To Be Black video that I found so incredibly moving this summer.
Um, well, I will say that as a black man watching Titus Andronicus and watching Ron play Aaron, there was, the, I mean, you saw it, but you know what an event that was to
It was
watch.
amazing.
Like it was such. It's what for me. It's the moment I needed in the play, because every character in that show is trash. Everyone is a trash bag.
Yes.
But for some reason, because Aaron's black, he's a trash bag, but he's black, so that's even worse. And that's just like that. And so it's like to see everyone just be completely terrible, and for him to get labeled as villain, I'm like, I'm not seeing one decent redeemable character in this entire cast. Everyone's got something that I'm like, oh, that's going to catch up with you. If there's any justice, it'll catch up with you. Every single one of them. But Aaron's labeled the villain. And so when he has this moment of like just basically a F all y'all at the end of it, I was like, yeah, that feels correct. And so it's I guess my relationship to the play Titus Andronicus is that I see Aaron as someone who's willing to do certain things because so much has been thrown at him over the course of his affiliation with Tamra, with the Goths, and now with the Romans. It's like, there's just so much being thrown that in order to just maintain, in order to just hold on, there's a lot that you got to just swallow, and you just got to deal with it because it's like you can't have a fight every time somebody pisses you off. And it's like the same, I mean, that's being Black in the States right now. It's like there's some days where I don't want to ruin my day by having this fight. You know what I mean? It's like I'm sitting here like, oh, that was a microaggression. That makes me upset. It's gonna cost me more to have this out than it is for me to just be like, nah, I'll deal with it later. I'll lift heavy tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that happens a lot. I don't think I'm alone on that,
No.
And so I think that, like tying it into to be Black, and I think the thing that you highlighted so clearly is, you know, there is something that is asked uh, of Black people in general in this country that I feel is really important, which is like, and it's a really important thing to look at, and it's that you're not allowed to get mad back.
Nope.
That's always, you're never allowed to get mad back because then you're stooping down to a level, and it's like,
Or
yeah,
you're being irrational,
or you're being irrational.
as if Ron said, you're not actually carrying 400 years of oppression and abuse and rape and mutilation and inability to vote, and like
Yeah,
as if I'm like, if we are not all outside raging constantly, that's irrational.
yeah, it's like and even if you're not consciously carrying all of that, just being like a middle schooler and then seeing this footage from the civil rights era for the first time, or for the second or third time, it's still very new or whatever, and all you see is people that look like other people in your classroom doing things to people that look like you, and it hurts your feelings real deeply, and no one else is affected.
Yeah.
Everyone else is like, oh, that sucks. But it's like, for me as a little kid, I'm walking away from that, I'm like hollowed out and angry, and people are asking me, why are you angry? I'm like, how the fuck can you ask me why am I angry?
Mhm.
And so it's like there's a lot of that that I think um, is sort of like always at just churning around in your chest. And um, I think that because we live in a society that we all want to benefit from in some way, there's certain things you don't want to do to upend it just
Yeah.
because there are rules that we've agreed to, right? And you want to do your part to obey those rules, but it means that you're having to sort of just swallow down a whole bunch. And I think that, like what you're saying with Malcolm X saying, it's like it's asking Black people to lose the name of action. It's because we've come so far down the road without actually really dealing with anything
Yes.
that now it's like, okay, do you want to really just flip the table over and just say like this is how we're doing it now, or is there another way out of this? And it's always incumbent upon the people that have had the wrong done to them to sort of
Come up with the other way.
come up with the other way.
There have been other ways. There have been rebellions. We don't highlight all the rebellions from
Right.
the Amistad to Nat Turner to, I mean, there have been major rebellions.
Haitian Revolution. Yeah.
And that's right. So we don't highlight those rebellions as well. That rage has been unleashed.
Yeah.
And I think during the course of history, even there are moments when it seemed and it's immediately squashed. It's immediately, as soon as the Black Panthers, started to, police their own communities, legitimately,
And set up schools.
That's right. Then you had COINTELPRO, you know, and FBI stepped in and with intelligence and flunkies who came in, you know, as spies. They systematically tore those organizations apart, you know, and they
Yeah.
were initially set up to feed children, to help our schools, to re-educate, and they turned them into violent, rageful Black people who were trying to take over the government, you know, and
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
actuality, they were just men and women who were trying to protect their children.
Yeah. All right. So you guys are amazing. And I know that there are questions from people around the world. So I'll invite Michael Sexton back in to help moderate our discussion.
Hey, am I back?
You're back.
Great, great. Guys, thank you so much for those readings and for this conversation. It just, I just kept thinking that this is what makes great artists, I have to say, and I think also makes great academics. But you know, the kind of bravery that it takes for the three of you, but and also for Ron to do that speech in that way, with that level of commitment and what comes down to vulnerability is really well, it's super valuable to me, and I think underappreciated to those that don't do it. To bring the truth into the room is hard, and that's what you guys have been doing tonight, and that's what you guys do in your work. So I just want to thank you for that. Um, and and yes, there are some. I mean, I'll just cop to one thing, or just I remember the moment that Will and Ron first said to me, like, "Do you think like what's the deal with Demetrius and like
Have you thought this
do we
through
know?"
properly?
And really, I think my answer was and it was a insufficient one, was I really wanted to work with both of these guys, both of these artists. And so this is what I wanted to do. And I think I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, and I grew up going to the theater and I grew up going to the park. And Joe Papp changed my life. And what was then called colorblind casting changed my life and, you know, opened my eyes to many things. But I think it was the moment when I thought, right, this is not a sufficient answer anymore. And I guess I'm just thankful beyond that, because the conversations that we avoid when we go to, and as I have, like, oh, it's colorblind, I don't know, we're just human beings, it's universal, are so rich and so, you know, valuable and so beautiful, that's one of the real shames of the reluctance of both the academe but also the theater world to just have the conversation. Let it happen for an hour,
Yeah.
as we just did. So thanks that from the crowd here. Just a couple things of appreciation. Hi, I'm a Chinese American poet and writer based in the Jersey Shore area. I'm a huge fan of Ron Cephas Jones from past theater productions and now This Is Us. Question for him: how do you see Shakespeare and theater in general helping us to navigate race relations, not just between Black and white, but among all groups? And thank you. That's Grace from Jersey.
What I've found, can you hear me, Michael?
Mhm.
Yeah. What I've found and what I've learned is that the beauty of Shakespeare is he writes about the human condition. And if you start from there and you're not afraid of the words and you want to learn and study, then everything else is elementary. I mean, the stories are fairly simple. Boy falls in love, boy falls out of love, boy falls in love. Misrepresentation, mystery, and then we find out that the person is who they were all along. I mean, the stories are simple. They're about love, they're about war, but they're intrinsically about the human condition. And all of us experience these feelings. I mean, you can't separate, no matter, like, again, like, no matter what color you are, we all feel pain. We all feel love. We all feel camaraderie. We all experience war, whether we're in war or outside of war. And this is what Shakespeare brings to the table: simple human feelings. And the stories I found were quite simple. They're not very complicated. The guy goes to war, and then you have a side story of a misidentification. Someone figures out that they're not the person they were. You have a villain, you have the hero, you have the prince, the princess. I mean, it's all human feelings. And that's how I found and learned and see Shakespeare when I go into it and when I read it. I read it because they're beautiful stories. They're funny, and he has humor, a lot of humor that's related to stuff that goes on in the barbershop, you know, in the community, around the table, when you're having dinner with your family, the same kind of jokes, all that stuff is in Shakespeare. We've been, I guess, taught or misled to believe that it's very complicated and very English and, you know, and high, you know, and we have to talk like this, and it's not. It's you can speak it in any dialect. And one of the things I told myself was, what if James Baldwin or Malcolm X or Maya Angelou would do Shakespeare? And that's how I heard Shakespeare. I didn't learn it in an academic setting. I learned it by going to the bookstore, and I learned it by listening to poets that I enjoyed reading and listening to: Haki Mahbudi, Amir Baraka. And I said to myself,
And all of them, every single person you just named read Shakespeare and knew
that's what I
Shakespeare.
mean. What would that sound like to me? And that's how I hear Shakespeare. I hear Shakespeare as if Maya Angelou was reading it. I hear Shakespeare as if Amiri Baraka was reading it, or Haki Mahbudi, or Nikki Giovanni. I rhythm it. And so I put my own rhythm to it. You have iambic pentameter, and then in the iambic pentameter is nothing but rhythm. Ba-da, 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 ba-da. You have 10 beats in the line. Buddha, 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 Buddha. So you can and you can jazz it, you can blues it. It has a rhythm already put in. It's a Eurocentric rhythm, but we are rhythmic people. So what better language to do than a language that is set up already with a rhythmic pattern? It's like rap. So that's how I see Shakespeare. And that's how I learned it. That's how I get a love of it, because I made it mine.
Beautiful. Do you guys, either of you guys have anything to answer Grace with? Right, we have others, so.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with Shakespeare. I mean, I will openly admit, like, sometimes it's like I start reading a play and I just start sweating immediately because I'm like, I don't know what I just read. I don't know what's happening. And then, you know, and then like sometimes I'll be watching something that's like 20 minutes in. I'm like, dang, I think I'm supposed to care by now, and I do not. So it's like, it's really, I feel like for me, it's like, it's a fun thing to do because it's something that it's like, okay, how do I take something that can be very opaque and make it real and tangible and immediate as much as I can? And, you know, and I also think that even with the stories being as simple as they are in certain ways, in other respects, they're so big. Like, they're simple, but there's like so many different things happening. So as an actor, it's like there's you know, it's not like you're just on one person's journey. You're on several different journeys and several different things that are of varying importance to different people. And in that regard, it's like watching Shakespeare can be really exciting because you're watching a lot of separate stories happening within, in a way that I think a lot of modern drama usually holds on to one thing and really prunes away a lot of stuff. And Shakespeare just doesn't. That's not as present, and so it's so that's interesting.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. I will say that the To Be or Not to Be was super powerful as well, and felt like brought into the room, that it was contemporary. Someone asked where you could find the link to the recording of the To Be Black. It's if you go to YouTube and find the Public Theater's channel of YouTube, there's some playlists, and one of the playlists is To Be Black, and you can watch it. It's an amazing group of actors.
It's gorgeous. It's
A
gorgeous.
lovely piece of work. Um, from Chelsea Lee, thank you all for being here. What is it about watching revenge that you think the audience finds so satisfying, especially since the violence in this play does not achieve the ends that Aaron desires? So what is the appeal of this kind of play for audience?
Does it not achieve the ends that Aaron desires? He
Yes.
says at the beginning of the play, he wants to destroy the commonweal, which occurs. So
Oh,
I don't know. I mean, I find I am obsessed with revenge tragedies. And all my friends think it's hilarious because I'm not someone who personally exacts revenge. Like that's just not part of how I operate, but I love watching revenge narratives. And I think it's because people are doing precisely what Will and Ron were talking about, which is throwing up the table, vomiting out all the bile that they've held in. And it's usually in revenge tragedy, it's usually people who feel that they are outside of the bounds of justice, right? That for whatever reason, they can't go through the normal means. And so they're like, fuck it. Like we're gonna destroy everything. And then if I can't go through the proper means of justice. And I think as a Black viewer and reader, that to me opens up a space that's cleansing in a way, or cathartic, I think, because it's almost as if like, well, if we can't do this in real life and and justice is still that far off, maybe this is a way of at least feeling some of the catharsis that can occur there. But that might be my own neuroses too.
I think that occurs also, and if you look at all the Marvel characters, they're all based on revenge.
Yeah, that's
The whole
exactly
idea
true.
about the superhero is to get revenge for the people. I mean,
Yep. And Westerns too are all revenge. The whole Western, yeah.
Captain America, John Wayne, it's like, revenge.
Yeah.
You got to get back at it. You stole from me, I'm going to steal from you. We all wait for that moment when we don't want the villain to get away with what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
They always solve the murders because they don't want to leave the murder unsolved at the end of the play or at the end of the TV series. It's like you have to solve the murder for the audience or else they're going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the appeals of revenge tragedy is that I think it does, and I think Titus Andronicus does, and Hamlet certainly does. It does ask the question about where does revenge end and justice begin? Like how easily confused those two categories are, or are they different, or just that very vexing and question is engaged fully in these plays.
Yeah, and I remember, Michael, the summer right after the murder of George Floyd, when you and I were speaking about, Michael's like, I think we should do something around this. And I was like, I don't know, it's a little raw. And I sent him a video of this amazing woman. It's like a 2-minute video. She's standing outside and the interviewer's like, Target's burning. And she's like, you think we care about, you are lucky we're only burning down Target. He's like, all the past wrongs, and this is what we're doing. You are lucky. This is what we're doing. So I remember, like, right there is a lot of like the distinction between revenge and justice, and I think that's absolutely right.
Just from India, as a young Black acting student, it feels so good to hear Black people dissect their experience in classical theater with full transparency. At predominantly white schools, we often don't have a space to hear or have these conversations. I admire you all and thank you. And here's an academic sounding question that Ayana, maybe you can help me. Eleanor tells me that Eric Sams has convincingly proved that Edmund Ironside was Shakespeare's first play, which was reworked to become Titus Andronicus. Have you looked into how Edmund Ironside became Titus Andronicus in your analysis?
No,
Have you heard
and no, I haven't heard that. And I would be wary of any of those kind of originary tales. We do know that parts of Titus Andronicus were probably written by George Peele. I think probably the first scene, but that doesn't mean that Ironsides was the first draft or first version of Titus Andronicus. I think there's not enough evidence to make that compelling.
Great. And a question from Anonymous. Have any of you read or performed Une Tempête by M. Césaire? I'd love to hear your thoughts about and experiences with adaptations like that one that explicitly deal with the colonialist overtones of plays like The Tempest. Ayana, do you know that work?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Aimé Césaire is a Martinican playwright, rewrote The Tempest from a pretty, post-colonial viewpoint, where Caliban gets to say, chant Uhuru and, hey freedom, hey freedom. So it is a beautiful play. And I have to say, I'm really disappointed in theaters like the Public that don't have, regular productions of Une Tempête. So I would love to see some more major productions. Ron, have you ever been in it?
Well, no, but that's what I was making reference to earlier when I was talking about colonization.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful interpretation, and I haven't explored it as much as I would like to, but I certainly did when I took on the role of Caliban, and I realized that there was a lot more to this idea than met the eye, and exploring that's when that started to happen, and then being able to do a production uptown in Harlem with the Classical Theater Harlem. They kind of designed that whole idea through an Afrocentric lens. But going back to the original comment, Michael and Ayana, that's when I posed that first idea about The Tempest and the whole idea of colonization and how different parts of the world immediately acknowledge that. If you go to, I did it in Hong Kong, Singapore, Madrid, Amsterdam, Germany, and each one of those cities that I did it in, they immediately related to Caliban as a colonized person on an island. So there were more banners about Caliban than there was about Prospero. I'll put it like that. You saw Caliban's face more than you did Prospero. So that told you a lot about how different parts of the world read and interpret Shakespeare as well.
I'm going to ask two more questions and then we'll get out of here. But I'd like both of these questions. One, I think, is for Ayana, but I can answer too. Why did you choose Titus Andronicus as the basis for this conversation over other Shakespeare plays that are perhaps more accessible and possible, obvious, i.e. Othello?
Oh, please. I mean, I think if you want to talk about like fear of Black vengeance, Othello is not it, right? I mean, Aaron is so frightening. And so for my money, I would rather see a Titus any day than an Othello. And I also think, right, so it is, Titus Andronicus is less well known than Othello, but we can change that. Like that, the next 200 years don't have to resemble the last 200 years. So anyway, so that's my, but Michael's heard me rail about this over and over again.
So if you take the death scene in Othello when he kills Desdemona, and you comparatively compare it to the actions of Aaron, and you incorporate the actions of Aaron into that scene, you would get an Aaron into Othello. You could do that, but I think most directors and most producers don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Because that's a murderous scene, and you could set it up to where you could bring up that rage to the point where Othello, the murder in that could be so, I don't know, your mind could go into play, but not as clearly and expositionally as Aaron, of course, like you said, Ayana. But in Othello, you could find a way to go there. There's room if you dare to take it.
And there is a relatively new play by a Canadian playwright, and I'm going to forget his name, and I apologize, but it's called Shakespeare's Nigga, and it is a rewriting where Othello has a Black friend named Aaron, and they get to talk to each other. So like, again, like what happens when you have narratives where you're not the only one, but you actually have a friend where you can be like, that's crazy, that's racist, right?
Right.
Cool.
right.
All right. This is the last question. And thank you everybody for being here. And thank you for all of there's lots of questions I didn't get to. I apologize, but I really appreciate you asking and giving us all these great thoughts. But what I want to close with is, what advice would you have for young Black performers who might be working with white directors who are not comfortable with conversations about race?
Ooh, Will, you should start.
Oh, like that's a tough one, right? Because it's like it's one of those things where it's like how uncomfortable do I want to be having this conversation? But then like I think that there's no way that we can just completely ignore our appearances and not embrace that for whatever that may be. And so it's I think that it's best to sort of take them head on and to just be like, I think honestly we're living in a time right now where people are being encouraged to have the conversations. So I feel like where I was like 15 years ago trying to have some of these conversations, and where someone my age around this time it would be a much, I would hope that it would be a much more open environment to at least start down the road. Um, Not that things were like a dumpster fire when I was like 25. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just like but it's just like I feel like it's in the front of people's minds a little bit more now, and I think it's really important with that being front of mind to take advantage of it and to engage it head on.
I would follow Will exactly verbatim. I think we're in a time now where, fortunately and hopefully, we can continue to have that dialogue. I think it's important that the actor, director, and the writers and people get together to be open, at least start that dialogue before you start the production. And if the director's not open to it at all, then you have a dilemma, because, like Will said, you can't just deny it. You can't push it aside. If the actor and the people around you need to incorporate it or talk about it, at least be open to having the dialogue. I think that's what's so brilliant about the public. I think that's what's so brilliant about Michael Sexton and the things that he's doing with Shakespeare, is that you have to be open. And once you open, you're going to find some really wonderful, beautiful things that have never been done before. But you have to be able to open the door, at least.
Absolutely.
Get the director fired. I don't know. It's like you're working with the wrong person, but everyone has to be open for the dialogue before you can even start the action.
Right. And as a white director who has worked with African American actors who have insisted that we have some conversations, sometimes uncomfortable to begin with, I hope this is encouraging, say that those have all been valuable, rich conversations that as reluctant or as scared as I was to have them to begin with, always thankful and grateful to have them, and the grace with which they've been brought to me has been humbling for me. And just as this conversation tonight has been full of grace and full of the truth, and has been an act of generosity, and one that I think, one that I'm very grateful for. So I want to thank Will and Ron and Ayana for this evening.
Thank you, Ayana. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks everybody for coming and staying and talking. Everybody stay safe.
Good to see you.
Help is on the way. Yeah, man. Nice
Thank
to see
you all. Thank you all.
Ayana, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Pleasure.
Peace.